Tell the jury a little bit about your educational background during those growing up years and your work experience.
I worked any job that I could from the time I was really young. I wanted to get out of Texas and do something with my life and see things and do things. So I was in school and really pushed myself to, I just always pushed myself to be able to accelerate the process. I wanted to, get out of school as fast as I could, and I wanted to do more things with my life than stay in Texas.
So what types of things, so where did you go to school when you were younger?
I was a scholarship kid at a Catholic school growing up, several different Catholic schools, but they were always in the other, on the other side of town, in the wealthier part of town. And I grew up quite working class, and thankfully with, as long as I maintained an A average, I enjoyed the benefit of a scholarship, and I did that until I realized that I could take my GED and SATs early, and I did that and placed out of school and effectively left school at 16 years old, I believe.
And what did you do for work during those younger years?
I took any job that I could. I worked at my father's construction company, sometimes, just administrative stuff. I mean, it was a small company. But I answered phones, and I worked at a modeling agency that was also, offered photography classes, makeup classes, hair and makeup classes for people that were pursuing a career in entertainment. And I started taking classes that I paid for by working there, effectively as a trade. And I eventually worked there long enough to be able to pay for my headshots, which are the pictures that you use in the industry to promote yourself, in whatever, acting, modeling, or both.
Okay. And what, if any, charitable work did you do when you were still young?
It started off as a requirement for the school I went to, and then I liked it so much, I think, because it meant I wasn't at home. And that was important to me, is just to not spend time at home. And I really loved meeting people, so I worked at the soup kitchen every morning before school, during the school year, for about 4 years. I didn't go on weekends, but on weekends I would do various things. Worked at children's museums, typically, because they would work with younger volunteers, and mostly soup kitchens and things involving children. I worked at with deaf kids for a while, and I love it.
And when you worked with deaf kids, what, if anything, did you do to learn to be able to work with them?
Objection leading and 404. And relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled. Well, I taught myself how to sign basic sign language, and then I pursued it. I audited a course at the community college, which I ended up going to get out of high school early later on. But I would audit classes. The teachers never wanted to kick the random 12-year-old out of their class, I suppose. So I remarkably was able to audit, I think, the majority of 2 semesters, and that's also helped me learn.
So how did you end up in Los Angeles?
I did a small job in Texas where I played a part in a movie, and the actor in the movie that I was playing opposite had an agent visiting him from LA, and I met her on set, and she said that she had heard about me from another bit part I did. I was taking jobs in Austin for really anything, to be an extra, to apply I did makeup once. I Nothing, no job was too small or, for me. So I put myself out there, and she had heard about me, and she said, I have heard about you in this town, and I'd love to meet you in LA if you're ever out in LA. And I was like, when can I come? And she made an appointment with me for the following week, and I used all but $180 or something to get out there, and I landed. I didn't know anyone. I was 17, and I've effectively been there ever since, I suppose.
So when you arrived in Hollywood, please tell the jury what you did to get moving there, get going.
I went to every audition, every casting, every meeting, every appointment that I could. I put myself out there. I didn't have a car because those were expensive. So I took the bus around LA. It was before smartphones. I had a Thomas guide in my bag and a change of tank tops. Not that it mattered, but I went to about 10 auditions sometimes a day and would change clothes if I needed to in the back of the bus I was taking. And I just hustled from one audition to the other. And I got a bit part on one thing, and then I got a bit part on another thing. And then eventually my roles kind of became more important or bigger. And it's been a slow progression, I guess, since then, of doing either tiny bit parts in bigger movies or doing, larger roles in movies that no one would see. And I guess, it still is kind of like that.
So I'm going to ask you to go from 2002 to 2009. If you could just describe for the jury a little bit what types of parts you had. I think they've indicated they didn't. You have not been well known here in this courtroom compared to Mr. Depp. So perhaps just take them through a little bit of that.
Yeah, that's fair. I did small roles in big films like Zombieland and Pineapple Express and movies that were well known. My first one was Friday Night Lights. But again, I had small roles in those bigger films. And then I would do larger roles in kind of smaller films. Like I did a project where I was the lead in a John Carpenter film, and he came out of retirement to do that. And that's kind of how it was in terms of my career for those that first initial 10 years or so. It was just going from slightly bigger role to slightly bigger role, and just working my butt off.
So I'm going to take you up to 2008. Did there come a time that you auditioned for the Rum Diary?
Yes, I auditioned for that in about 2008, I believe.
Please describe for the jury your experience in auditioning for the Rum Diary.
Well, I auditioned a few times, which is common in my work. You get a call back, as they say. And I think I had at least one, maybe two callbacks with the director. And then I got a call saying that Johnny, who at the time was, I think I knew that he was producing it as well, was doing a project that was something very personal to him. He was reprising his role as his late friend, Hunter S. Thompson, and it was a very important project to him, and that he wanted to meet me in person. I thought I would be going for maybe an audition, but it was just a meeting. I went to his office and met with him for a few hours.
And what did you talk about during those few hours?
We talked about books and music, poetry. We liked a lot of the same stuff, obscure writers and, interesting books and pieces of poetry that I haven't heard anybody else reference or know or like. And he was very well read and charismatic. And, I think I left the office with a few books that he gave me. And we spent the whole time just talking about things that we care about. And I was so surprised that somebody, I knew who he was. I wasn't familiar, I wasn't a fan of his work. I wasn't familiar with him, but I knew who he was. He's one of the most famous people in the world. So it was already a weird thing to go and get called into his office. And, I'm a no-name actor. I was 22, I think. And I thought it was unusual. It was weird because he was twice my age and he's this world-famous actor. And here we are getting along about obscure books and weird, old blues. And I thought it was remarkable. I just hadn't really, I thought it was unusual and remarkable. I left there just feeling like, wow.
So did there come a time that you learned that you were going to be cast for the role in the Rum Diary?
Yes, a few days later, my agent said that Johnny's going to call you. We gave him your phone number. I was like, oh, okay. And shortly after, my phone rings, I pick it up, and I hear, this like deep voice on the other line, and he said, "You got the, you're it, kid. You're the dream. Hunter wrote this part, and you're the dream. You're it, kid." I was like,
and
amazed.
Please describe for the jury what that means. What was the Rum Diary and this Hunter Thompson? What was the concept here, and what role were you playing?
Well, it was my understanding that he was bringing to life his late friend. And what he told me was that this character is supposed to be the dream woman, like the dream, American dream. And so I knew what he meant. He indicated to me when he told me I got the role that I was that, that I was the dream kid. That's what he said.
So did there come a time that you started filming the Rum Diary?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how much. I think we started filming in maybe March of 2009.
And where did you film the Rum Diary?
We shot it in Puerto Rico.
And describe, if you can, the events of the filming and your interactions with Mr. Depp during that time.
It was a bit surreal, filming in a place like Puerto Rico. It was beautiful. It takes place in the 50s, so everything really looked beautiful, cars and clothing, the music. It was a very colorful shoot in general. I couldn't have asked for, a better scenario. I was on film. I was on set, reading my books, and occasionally Johnny would talk to me, and then he started to be really kind to me, like more open with me. When we'd have hot days filming, there'd be this big SUV pull up, and a security guard would kind of usher me into this car, and it would have the AC blasting, and I'd be sitting in the back of the SUV just thinking what a strange experience the whole thing was. And, we didn't really have a whole lot of interaction on set until we did a scene that involved kissing. We had a kissing scene, and it didn't feel like a normal scene anymore. It felt more real. There are certain things that you do in the job to be professional, like when you have to do that sort of scene, and you don't you don't use your tongue if you can avoid it. There's certain things that you do to just maintain a certain line, and it just felt like those lines were blurred. He grabbed my face and pulled me into him and really kissed me. But we were filming a scene.
Did he use his tongue?
Yes.
Okay. Did you celebrate your birthday while you were in Puerto Rico?
I did. I celebrated, I think, maybe my 23rd birthday there.
And what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do for your birthday?
Well, we were already kind of talking about books and poetry and things like that. He gave me a few really beautiful poetry books. And he gave me a bicycle, like a vintage bicycle, because at the time I was riding around on a bike, and I had a lot of time off since I was a smaller role in the movie. And yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. Now, did there come a time that you ended up visiting him in his trailer?
Yes, I think there was we would hang out if, after or in between scenes or in between setups. We often were, talking about things and would continue the conversation into the trailer, often with the director. Bruce Robinson was his name. And then at one point we talk about wine. It's another thing that Johnny and I shared in common, a love for wine, red wine. And we were talking about a kind of wine that I enjoyed, and I was, going on about how great this bargain wine was, and I didn't understand, how much more sophisticated Johnny's taste in wine was. So I was going on about the virtues of Malbec or something, and I brought him a bottle of this wine, and I set it down. And at some point, I'm going back to get back to set, and he kind of kicked his foot up in the air and basically kind of lifted the back of my bathrobe up. And
Can I just stop you there? Why were you wearing a bathrobe?
because I was doing a scene, it was a period film, so it took place in the 50s. And so I had all of this old undergarments that are for that time era on. And the scene involved me changing. So I had all the costume on. And he kind of picked up the back of my robe with his boot. And I kind of turned around and laughed, giggled, I didn't know what to make of it at the time. And I just kind of giggled and batted it away playfully. And he kind of playfully kind of pushed me down on this bed sofa that was in his trailer, just playful and flirtatious. And he said, "Yum." And he kind of lifted up his eyebrows like that. And I just giggled, laughed it off, kind of batted him away, and, moved on, went back to set.
And were you in a relationship at that time?
I was.
Okay. And was Mr. Depp in a relationship at that time?
That was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. And did anything else of significant happen during that time period while you were filming with Mr. Depp, other than what you've told us?
We just had this, it was a friendship, a flirtatious thing. I felt chemistry. I felt this other thing that went beyond the pale of my job, for sure. Johnny clearly felt that way about me, had indicated to me that that's how he felt in many different ways. But at the same time, we were both in relationships, and it is a job, and, it was intimidating. And I just remember feeling kind of intimidated and a little nervous about that. And I also was in a relationship, so we went our separate ways, and I didn't hear from him for a long time.
And that's, so approximately how long were you filming in Puerto Rico for the Rum Diary?
A few months is my best
All right.
guess.
And when you left Puerto Rico in the filming, when is the next time that you had any contact from Mr. Depp? And contact could include anything, communications, written communications, as well as telephone or otherwise.
We had no contact until Johnny called me on the phone one day, and I was driving, and he invited me over to his home in California, in Beverly Hills. And I it was out of the blue. I didn't even have his phone number, so it was quite unexpected. He called me a second time, but I don't think we actually connected, or we didn't stay on the phone because we didn't really speak, but the first time was the only time I actually spoke to him, and he invited me over to his house under kind of he said that, we could get Bruce, who was the director, to come over, something about the movie, but it was clearly not about the movie, if you know what I mean. It was, so I said, I said, my friends are in town, and I'm busy with that, and kind of hung up, feeling really startled, that didn't know what else to do.
What, if any, gifts did Mr. Depp send you during that time period after you filmed the Rum Diary?
He sent me several gifts. He sent me a beautiful dress, one that I wore in the movie, with a beautiful handwritten note, said happy wrapping, and made a reference to the dress being wrapping paper. He sent me a few gorgeous, expensive, what I can only assume are expensive, collectible books, items. And then when I was away filming on a different job, he he did send me some guitars. I know one delivery, I was informed about one delivery, and my partner at the time intercepted the attempt to deliver and called me immediately and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Send it back." And she did, and she indicated that there was another one that had already previously attempted delivery, and it was also rejected. I sent it back because I wasn't there, and I wouldn't have accepted it anyway.
Okay. Did there come a time that you ended up having to go on a press tour for the Rum Diary?
I got a call for the Rum Diary press tour in the fall of 2011.
So that's close to 2.5 years after you filmed?
I'm an actress, not a mathematician for a reason. Roughly, yes.
Okay. And could you please describe for the jury what a press tour is? Just explain it to them.
Well, you take a movie once it's completed, and if it doesn't have distribution, as part of the promotion of that movie, you go to these various places, normally cities like London or New York, and you do press events in those cities to kind of promote the film, and you go to place talking about the film.
And so you were then called to participate in the press tour for the Rum Diary?
Yes, I had just finished going through the process of separation with my former partner, and I was moving and going through that, and I got a phone call saying, "Remember that movie you did in Puerto Rico? Well, they want you for the press tour." And I said, well, perfect timing. And we did that, I think late October 2011.
Okay. So describe for the jury your interactions with Mr. Depp during the press tour.
Well, on the the beginning of the tour was Los Angeles, where we both lived, and we did a press day, normal press day, and then at the end of it, I was invited by Johnny to come up to his room to have a drink with him and the director of the film. And I went up to the room to see both him and Bruce, but as soon as I got there, Johnny said Bruce wasn't going to make it. So I stayed. Johnny and I started talking. He asked me about my relationship. I said, well, I'm going through it. I'm going through the separation right now, and it's been, rough couple of months, but that's normal. And he said, well, that's same with me. It's been, I can't remember exactly how long he said it had been, but that he had split from the mother of his kids, and said that he understood.
All right. And then what happened next?
Then we drank red wine and continued to talk, and the talking became us, reconnect. It was like reconnection was almost instant. It was just chemistry. It's hard to explain that, but we sat on the couch and we talked, and it felt like there was it felt like there was an electricity to the room, and it's how I felt when I was alone with him anyway. And it was instant again. I was like, whoa. So on the couch, we talked, finished some wine, and then I got up and left. And as I went to leave, he grabbed both sides of my face, similar to what he did in Puerto Rico when we were filming that scene. And he kissed me, and I kissed him back.
And what happened next with respect to any relationship with Mr. Depp?
Well, then we fell in love. We went on this press tour, and we went. It was a beautiful and strange time. We were flying from one, not together, but going from one city to the next, Europe, New York, Los Angeles, as I said, and we're just traveling around talking about this movie that we did together, that we participated in together, and we were falling in love. I mean, it was just, at the first dinner in London, he sat me next to me. He produced the film and was a part of controlling the film and was responsible for different things, and I was as an actor having a small part in it. And we went on this press tour, and I think in London he had me sat next to him at a dinner, and then we ended up spending the night together in my hotel room. And for the rest of the press tour, it was on. I'll put it that way.
All right. And how long approximately did the press tour go?
I don't know exactly how long it lasted. I think, there were press engagements in this city for a few days, and then another city for a few days, and then there was a break, and then there was another press opportunity, I believe. So it was kind of spread out over maybe a month, if I'm guessing.
So when you returned to Los Angeles, what, if anything, took place with any relationship with Mr. Depp?
Well, once we were back from the press tour, we had this, whirlwind romance kind of just in these beautiful places all over, and we're falling in love and not able to really show it because the world didn't know about the split between he and his former partner. And of course, as a woman, I was like, is that troubling? And I'd ask him, no, he swore to me that they hadn't even shared a bed for a year, and that they were protecting the kids and not publicizing it. So, or not making it known to the press. And so we kind of had to be a little bit under the radar. Not a little bit, we had to be really under the radar, because as Johnny pointed out, that the world would blame me and call me a homewrecker, even though I had nothing to do with it. So we were secretly dating, and then, it was beautiful. It was, I felt like this man knew me and saw me in a way that no one else had. I felt he understood me. I felt he understood where I came from. I felt that when I was around Johnny, I felt like the most beautiful person in the whole world. It made me feel seen, made me feel like $1 million. And that kind of feeling where, it's just lavish gifts and lavish expressions of love, and how he had never met a woman like me. I mean, I remember he took the foil off of this bottle and put it on my ring finger, and I had only been with him days, or maybe it was weeks at the time. Yeah, it was probably about a few weeks, but it just felt very intense. But we weren't doing normal life stuff. We weren't stuck in traffic with each other. We weren't going to the grocery store and doing life. We were hiding in these places around the world. He has so many homes, and so we'd be in one of those homes or my home at the time, and it would be like a bubble, like we were in this little bubble of secrecy, and it felt like a warm glow, as we would say. Just music and the kind of books that we both loved and poetry that we both knew by heart, and it felt like a dream. It felt like absolute magic.
So while you're dating, I take it you're dating at this point, right?
Yeah, sorry,
While you're falling in love, you're also dating, right? Okay.
Yes.
Did there come a time early on that you ended up going to his Bahamas island?
Yes. So shortly after, we, I think, started dating October of 2011, and as I mentioned, this bubble, where he'd come over to my house and not leave for like 3 or 4 days, just smoking cigarettes and playing music and reading poetry to me or painting me or, just talking. And then he would disappear. And there'd be just no way to get a hold of him, no way to contact him. At first, I didn't really think anything about it, but he disappeared at one point, and then came back and said he was dealing with some health issue, and would I join him in the Bahamas? And I think that's when I learned he had an island, and I was on a trip with a friend of mine in Spain, and it was for the holidays, and I kind of rerouted my trip so I could come and land in LA landing in Miami instead of LA, so I could go and meet him on the island. And he had Keenan come and meet me on that trip, like in Miami. I get off one plane, get onto another, and go and join him on his private island. And I noticed he was drinking Beck's and tea, but like lots of tea. And I didn't foolishly think anything of it. I just, thought the man really, seriously, I missed it before, but really, really loves tea. And we had this beautiful, less than a week probably, trip in the Bahamas, a private island, beautiful sandy beaches. It's a scene that you just don't, I had never experienced anything like that. It was a beautiful place, a beautiful time, and I fell head over heels in love with this man.
So after the Bahamas, I assume you came back, and are we talking now early 2012?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what were you doing work-wise while you were dating him in this early stage?
What I always do, I would be taking job to job to job, going from one movie to the next, mostly not filming in LA. So weirdly, you live in LA to go shoot on location in other places. So when I was in town, we would go back to this bubble, like insular bubble with beautiful, blaringly loud music and no one else and nothing else. And then I'd go off to work. And so would he. Eventually, yeah, he left to shoot Lone Ranger, I believe.
Okay. Now, we've heard a little bit about Lone Ranger, and that's about mid-2012, is that right, when he was shooting that?
That sounds right, mid-2012, yeah.
And were you shooting anything at that time?
I was shooting...
Machete Kills?
I believe I was shooting Machete Kills in Austin. I had a small part in a Robert Rodriguez film that shot in Austin. Okay. But I think Johnny was shooting and then having some time off, and there was just a lot of travel, a lot of movement. So.
Okay. And so what, if any, visiting did you do with Johnny while he was on his set for Lone Ranger, and where was he?
Well, he was filming all over the Southwest, and at some point I came to visit him and on one of his locations, and I would stay in the house because I couldn't really, occasionally I would leave with his security guards, but I didn't really have anything to do but visit him for a few days. So I'd cook and kind of stay at home and paint or whatever and wait for him to come home and have dinner ready. And we would have these little bubbles, but kind of scattered throughout the Southwest and as he was filming. And at the time, Johnny had, when I first arrived at one of these locations, it was the first time that Johnny told me that he had a health issue, something with his liver, and that he wasn't, that's why he was not drinking. He was drinking a lot of tea, like a lot of tea.
Okay. And so we've heard a little testimony about boots. What, if anything, did you do to help Johnny with his boots?
Well, I mean, I suppose that I took off his boots and it made an impression on him, and I was happy to, anything I can do to show love. Certainly how I felt about him. But if he wanted to take off his own boots, he certainly could.
Did you buy Mr. Depp any knives during that time period?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
What, if anything, did you do with respect to knives during the time period you were with him in the Lone Ranger?
Objection leading.
What, if anything?
Overruled.
Johnny had a thing for turquoise, and that eventually, being in the Southwest, it can happen really quickly. I also too really love turquoise, and he has he loved knives. He loves a lot of things. When Johnny loves things, he does it a lot, and lots of it. So he had these daggers that he had given me that they were beautiful in design. And they're, long curved daggers. And he just talked a lot about knives, had a knife and gun collection, and was quite proud of it. And at some point, I don't really remember exactly when it was, but at some point I picked up what I thought was a really beautiful turquoise handled knife. And I had it engraved with a saying that Johnny would say to me all the time, which I thought was romantic, as funny as that is to say now.
And what was the expression, the saying?
Until death, hasta la muerte in Spanish.
Now, by the time that you're visiting Mr. Depp during his shooting of Lone Ranger in the June through August 2012 timeframe, what, if any, relationship has he developed with your family?
Oh, well, starting really early on, Johnny was so kind, so generous to my family, but especially my mom and dad. He met my dad, and my dad's a big personality. He's a rowdy guy, and Johnny just all of a sudden, I had never noticed, Johnny have a southern, all of a sudden Johnny had this southern accent and was really like buddies with him, and they really seemed to get along very well. They're, just like instantly he was giving my dad gifts. He gave him guns, he gave him knives. They had this, Johnny just really just showered my dad, and my dad's a working man, salt of the earth guy, and he was just like, floored. He's getting all these amazing gifts and being invited to come on to these locations, and Johnny's this big movie star, and my dad was just like, I think my dad would have married him himself, not if I hadn't. And he just instantly, he gave my mom jewelry, brought her out to come and see me while I was visiting Johnny on Lone Ranger in some part of the Southwest. I think it was Colorado. He gave her this beautiful turquoise necklace, and they were definitely taken by him.
And what, if any, relationship had Mr. Depp forged with Whitney by this time, your sister?
I believe the relationship came a little bit later as they got to know each other, but he did the same thing with my sister and just really found a bond with them that, you know, was, it was, you know, he tried to do anything and everything he could to make them feel like special, and they did. You know, my mom, my dad, and my sister.
And what, if any, relationships did Mr. Depp form with your friends?
Well, Johnny's so generous and can be this really, like, overly generous almost, you know, like showering you with gifts and compliments and just, I mean, like, you know, and he has access and means to really, you know, we're not talking about giving you a card. We're like talking about just these like extravagant trips or these extravagant gestures, and it's a lot. And he did that with my close friends. I relied heavily on my friends and had a pretty strong support network with them, and he really just showered them with generosity and love and light, and invited them to come to these exotic places and flew people here and there. I mean, he's incredibly generous.
So going back to the filming of The Lone Ranger, what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do with respect to a horse?
Objection leading.
What, if anything?
Overruled. Johnny at one point insisted on buying me a horse, and I, of course, said that's extravagant. There's no way I could accept that. That's how will I take care of that horse? You know, it's so extravagant. So I said no, of course. Eventually, he got a hold of my dad and worked it out with my dad, like what kind of horse to buy, and then showed me a picture of this horse and said, "It's yours. It's coming here." I think it was being transported, and he said, you know, that he had my dad's help on it, picking out. And you know, I grew up on my dad's horses. You know, I grew up riding with my dad, so you know, I had resisted for I think about like a month and a half or something of him kind of bringing up the idea and me saying, "That's a crazy gift. No, thank you. No, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept." To all of a sudden I had a cult.
So let's take you through 2012 and your relationship. Could you just describe for the jury a little bit about how that relationship evolved through 2012?
It was always intense. It didn't become intense. It almost started that way. When I was with him, you know, I felt that electricity in my body. I felt like butterflies. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't see straight practically. It was just, you know, I was head over heels in love, and he felt like that to me. He felt like he was also in love. I didn't feel like he was faking it. I felt like what we had, it felt like to me at the time there wasn't any love like that, you know. I mean, and then he started to kind of do this thing again where he'd disappear and he'd come back. And I remember at first when he first started drinking, I didn't really think much of it, but all of a sudden the behavior kind of started to go in line with the disappearing, and he'd come back and he'd just be different. And I'd say something and he'd accuse me of saying something else or saying it in a different way, or he would, it was mostly my clothing at the time and me working. That was the main thing. Like, I found myself trying to not talk about auditions because it would change the mood so dramatically. I tried to, you know, he would make these comments about whoring myself out, but do so in the context of me acting, and he would talk about other actresses who do my role in this way where they were worthless whores, that they were fame hungry, expletive, just this. The point is, it felt really dirty to be an actor. Never mind that he was one. It was dirty that I wanted to do this job that I wanted to do, and I was doing the job of an actress. It was every time I was walking out of the house, he would ask me, "That's really what you're wearing, kid? Oh, I see." I wore a dress to an event once, and I felt beautiful in it. Like, stupid as that sounds, I felt pretty in this dress I picked out, and I showed it him because it's a carpet, it's red carpet, so it's like, publicized, and I kind of thought it was weird. He wasn't saying anything about it. I left him to go do this red carpet, and I was like, "Did you see the event I went to?" Basically, I felt pretty, and I thought, like, "Did you see that?" I wanted him to say something about that, I guess. And he said, well, this is after he stopped talking to me for some time, didn't tell me why. When he came back in my life, he wouldn't explain why he was acting different. He just kind of acted mad at me and didn't know what I had done wrong. And when I brought up the dress and the event, because it was an event to support a charity I was really involved with at the time, and I said, "Did you see that thing?" And he said, yeah, I think the whole world saw that, kid. That's how they'll remember you. That's how the world will remember you. And I was like, oh, come on. I mean, it's like, but I felt good in it. I felt good. And he said, "Yeah, kid, that's what you're putting out there in the world. No one will ever forget that. And that's all they'll see you as. That's what you wanted. That's what you were going for. My dress was slow cut. I get it. Slow cut. But I felt, I felt really embarrassed and horrible that I wore that. I felt like, how could I have made that choice? Of course, he's right. You start to believe it. I started to believe that made a lot of sense, of course. But it didn't stop with that. It was clothing in general. And when I walked out of the house, it wasn't just like, "Hey, you're not allowed to wear that." It was like, "Oh, really? That's what you're wearing. No wonder you get cast in those roles. No wonder you that's what you are. That's what you're making it." And it continued. And then there would be a blow up. And at first it was just to throw something, smash some things. It loves to smash up a place, an apartment, furniture. That's what it started with, glass. Threw glass at me, and I remember it was summer. And he just threw this glass across the kitchen, and it didn't hit me, but it shattered behind me, and I remember thinking that it very easily could have hit me. And that, calling me a whore, it didn't start with using the whore word, it was just comments until it would escalate. And then I started to notice the pattern of escalation where he'd throw glass or turn over a table. Then he would hit the wall, and then he'd hit the wall really close to my head. Like when I'm standing there, just hit the wall, screaming at me. But then he would disappear and get clean and sober, and he'd come back and tell me that he was done drinking, he was over it. Was done, cleaned himself up. He had done it before, and he'd do it again. And then he would go back to this wonderful, almost just unreal, but real, but unbelievably nice, sensitive, kind, warm, generous, interesting, funny man that I loved. And he would make me feel so loved, I would feel so distant from that thing that was so scary that I would not even recognize it too. And that was how, our relationship kind of started to develop in that first year.
Do you remember the first time that he physically hit you?
Yes.
Please tell the jury about it.
It was it's seemingly so stupid, so insignificant. I will never forget it. It changed my life. I was sitting on the couch, and we were talking. We were having a normal conversation, just there was no fighting, no argument, nothing. And he was drinking, and I didn't realize at the time, but I think he was using cocaine because it was like there was a jar of cocaine out on the table. I realize that sounds weird, but it's like an actual vintage jar of it. But I didn't see him use it at the time, so I didn't really factor that in. I just, he's drinking and we're talking, and there's music playing, and he's smoking cigarettes, and we're sitting next to each other on the couch. And I asked him about the tattoo he has on his arm. And to me, it just looked like black marks. I didn't know what it said. It just looked like muddled, faded tattoo that was hard to read. And I said, what does it say? And he said it says wino. It says wino. And I didn't see that. I thought he was joking because it didn't look like it said that at all. And I laughed. It was that simple. I just laughed because I thought he was joking. And slapped me across the face. And I laughed. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, this must be a joke. This must be a joke. Because I didn't know what was going on. I just stared at him, kind of laughing still, thinking that he was going to start laughing too to tell me it was a joke. But he didn't. He said, "You think it's so funny? You think it's funny, bitch. You think you're a funny bitch." And he slapped me again. Like, it was clear it wasn't a joke anymore. And I stopped laughing, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. You would think you would have a response, but I, as a woman, had never been hit like that. I'm an adult, and I'm sitting next to the man I love, and he slapped me for no reason, it seemed like, and I missed the point. It was that stupid. Second slap, I know he's not kidding, but I don't know what else to say or do, so I just stared at him. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I didn't move or freak out or defend myself or say, "What are you doing? You're crazy." I just stared at him because I didn't know what else to do. And he slaps me one more time. Hard. I lose my balance. At this point, we're sitting next to each other on the edge of the couch, or I was on the edge of the couch. And I'm all of a sudden realizing that the worst thing has just happened to me that could possibly happen to you. I realized that I wish so much he had said he was joking, because it didn't hurt. It didn't physically hurt me. I was just sitting there on this carpet, looking at the dirty carpet, wondering how I wound up on this carpet and why I never noticed that the carpet was so filthy before, and I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. I just sat there thinking, how much time do I have till I figure out what I need to do? Because, God, did he just hit me? No, I didn't want to leave him. I didn't want this to be the reality. I didn't want to have the man I was in love with. I know you don't come back from that. I'm not dumb. I know you can't hit a woman. You can't hit a man. You can't hit anyone. You can't just hit somebody because I knew it was wrong, and I knew that I had to leave him. And that's what broke my heart. him. I thought if I got up out of that room, I'd leave the best thing that ever happened to me. And I wish I could sit here and say I stood up and I walked out of that house and I drew a line and I stood up for myself. But I was just looking at the dirty carpet trying to will myself to get up, to walk out of the door because I knew I needed to. And I really slowly, I stood up and I remember looking at him in the eye and just looking at him, frankly, because I didn't know what else to do. And before I know it, he starts crying. And, you know, like I had never seen an adult man cry. I didn't even really see my dad cry at my grandma's funeral. You know, it's weird. And he's crying. Tears, I mean, just falling out of his eyes. He gets down on his knees and he grabs my hands and he's touching my hands and he's saying to me, I will never do that again. I'm so sorry, baby. I put the fucker away. I thought I killed it and it's done. I thought I put the monster away and I've done it before. It's done. But on his knees. And I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say. I just remember thinking that it was just, he was crying. He seemed so sorry, but I knew I couldn't just forgive him because right? That means it will happen again, no? You know, like I've seen the health class videos, like everyone else. And I got up in my car. I walked to the car. I didn't say anything. I made a point to not say, oh, it's okay, or anything like that. I just didn't say anything. I got up, I went to the car, I sat in my car, and I felt like I sat there forever. I didn't want to turn the key. I just leaned my head up against the window, and I remember just seeing my breath on the windshield, you know, on the glass of the window of the door, just seeing my breath and trying to will myself to have the strength to know what I should do in this moment, because I was heartbroken. And I sat there for a long time, and I eventually turned the key and drove home.
And what did you do after that?
I don't know. I don't remember what I did when I got home. I don't remember. I went to my therapist. I told her.
Objection, hearsay.
I'll sustain it as to what she may have told her.
I went home, and a few days later, started getting, I actually don't know how many days later, but I started getting calls and texts from Johnny, you know, apologizing profusely. I mean, just, you know, he said, I'd rather cut my hand off than ever lay it on you or lay it upon you, you know, and he had that way of talking. It felt like poetry. And he showed up to talk, like with the understanding that, you know, he understood I could never forgive him and it was done. So I felt kind of safe in saying, okay, let's have a talk, or, you know, yeah, we'll talk. I think I know I just wanted to see him, and he comes over, brings me gifts. He brought me a couple cases, actually, of that Vega Sicilia wine that we've heard about, which is a really nice, expensive wine that I could never, at that time, dream of affording, you know. And we talk, and he tells me that he had put this thing away, that I could trust him, that it would never happen again. Of course, it would never happen again. That he had put this thing away. He had killed the fucker, is what he said to me over and over again. I put that fucker away. I killed that monster. I'll kill it again. It's done. I'll never lay a hand on you again. And I wanted to believe him, so I chose to.
Chose to stay in the relationship?
Yeah, I did. I believed it, but I believed it wouldn't. I believed that there was a line he wouldn't cross again, and that was it.
And so you stayed, correct? You stayed in the relationship?
Yes.
Okay. So, is this a good time?
No,
Your Honor,
you can keep going a little longer, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So could you please describe for the jury the evolution of your relationship after that time with Johnny?
I don't know how long it was until things got bad again. He did start drinking again. I remember it was almost, he'd start drinking again, the disappearing thing, the coming back. He'd come back like in the middle of the night to my house. And it would be unclear to me, drunk, often really drunk, and kind of accusing me, but not directly. Nothing was very direct. It was a lot of accusations, but they were veiled. What I was wearing, who I was with, why didn't I text him back? I didn't text him back right away. This is when I was at my place in Orange. Sometimes he would show up to catch me. Like that was a pretext for coming over. And by the time we were done talking, I would have thought I had convinced him that I loved him, that I only loved him, there was no one else, and then that we were back in an upswing and would go back to good, loving, like sick, romantic love, like kind, sweet, velvety love. And then it would be something I said, why did you say it that way? If I had to leave for an audition, I could guarantee that couldn't guarantee, but 2 of those in a row, and when I came back, he was angry at me, and I wouldn't necessarily know why. And then he started accusing me of things, probably, like, at first it was indirect, and then it became really direct. Then the punching of the walls next to my head, which is a constant at that time in 2012 when he was drinking. Eventually that became... him accusing me of cheating. I'd defend myself. I'd say, that's crazy. You're wrong. I would never. The normal things. And it would escalate to the point where he would push me or shove me down, and then I'd get back up. And this happened several times. That's why it's not more specific, I suppose. When I'd get back up, I'd look him in the eye. I made a point of getting up and looking him in the eye. It's my way of defending myself at that time. And I'd look at him, and he'd ask me if I wanted to go again, and shove me back down. Eventually, he just hit me. Remember, he hit me in the face when I denied having an affair with my ex-wife, my ex-partner at the time. And he said he had proof. I denied it. And I was walking out of the bedroom, slapped me across the face. I turned to look at him. And I said, Johnny, you hit me. You just hit me.
I'm going to ask you, Michelle, can you bring up 1783, please?
What number again, please?
I'm sorry?
What number?
Defendants 1783?
1783, thank you.
Do you recognize this picture?
Yes, I do.
And could you tell us what it is?
It's a picture of my face with a note that Johnny left for me by the coffee. Typically is where we'd leave notes like that.
And does this accurately depict the scene portrayed?
It was one of those scenes. As embarrassing as it sounds now, I don't know which scene this came from. There was a lot. It escalated quickly, fast, and it became.
Amber, let me ask it a different way.
Thank you.
Is this a picture of you? Is it an accurate picture of you?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of 1783.
Your Honor, we have an objection. May we
Okay,
approach?
sure.
Would you please describe for the jury some of the cycles you had with Mr. Depp through 2012?
So, in 2012, the violence was pretty, relative to what it became, pretty, slapping, backhanding. Well, it went from this eggshell kind of, you're walking on eggshells, nothing you're doing is kind of right, but you don't know what you're doing wrong. And then I was doing something wrong clearly, but it was unclear within the scope of an argument what I was defending myself against. So it would shift from a rumor he had heard that I was with a friend, or I had been photographed standing too close to a male person. That was a person I had had something with, and I was lying to him about, and it would be eggshells, accusations, and then he would explode. It started with throwing things, destroying the property, and screaming at me. I remember the screaming at me was the worst, because I kind of always felt like I had done, I had to defend myself. I had to tell him so he didn't think these things were true. And sometimes, he would shift accusations while I'm trying to dispel one accusation. He'd start another one, and nothing I could do to calm him down. It seemed like I'd walk away, and that would make it worse. I remember in my apartment in Orange, he would grab me by the hair, or he'd grab me by the arm, pull me into him, scream at me that way. He'd smash things around me, then he would smash things very close to me, and then he would just hit me. And it started with slapping, and it got to be like repetitive slaps where he'd hold me in a position and slap me multiple times in a row. Then it would be, eventually I later would either push him off of me, or I'd try to hit his hands away from me. I'd try to, not in 2012 so much. At that time, I was mostly, my defense was, I'd go some other place. Like, I don't know how to describe that. I'd focus on something else. I'd stand up, look at him, try to stand up to him that way. Later, I adopted other kind of strategies to deal with it, but at the time in 2012, he'd have this blowout, and then he would leave, disappear, and I'd be committed to not talking to him. I'm done with this relationship. I can't take it anymore. I said that so many times. And then he'd come back, clean and sober, telling me either he had a chip. He didn't have any chips, but he would say, I've gone to meetings. I have a sober companion now. I'm doing this program. I'm reading this. I'm doing this. And he was done with drugs and alcohol for good this time. And he'd come back in my life, and with the combination of him being sober and having gone through this horrible thing where I felt like my heart ripped out of my chest, you know, like a relationship ending is hard, I think, for anyone, but ending under that circumstance is really painful. And so when he'd come back, it would almost feel like a solution to that, and it would feel great, and we would be good again, and he'd be extra nice and extra apologetic and extra loving, and we'd be back in the good bubble, the warm glow. And eventually I'd get bored, and then I'd see him drinking again. When I started to get upset, noticing the pattern of the violence going with the drinking and drugs, then he started sneaking it. So it became less clear, and I'd have to look for clues as to what he was on. So I just knew how to react, you know. Johnny on speed is very different from Johnny on opiates. Johnny on opiates very different from Adderall and cocaine Johnny, which is very different from Quaaludes Johnny. But I had to get good at paying attention to the different versions of him. 2012, I was in the beginning stages of this, just learning these patterns. I was just learning that drinking kind of correlated with the violence.
And did you confide in anyone about these issues you were having? I think she can
Objection
say
hearsay?
I think she can say if she told anybody.
As long as she doesn't say what she said.
Right, right. So did you tell anyone?
Yes, I did.
Who did you tell?
I told my therapist. I eventually told my mom.
And let's go ahead and take a look at Defendants Exhibit 150. 150.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay. Yeah.
Why did you decide to confide in your mother about the issues you were having with Mr. Depp?
I think I felt safe talking to my mom because I knew that she understood these dynamics and she wouldn't judge me for staying with him, for loving him, even though this was happening and was happening to me. I knew she would understand.
And when approximately did you start confiding in your mom about your issues with Mr. Depp and the physical abuse?
Objection, hearsay, compound.
I sustain as a compound.
When did you start confiding in your mother about the abuse you were suffering at the hands of Mr. Depp?
I was confiding in her from the very beginning about the abuse, the psychological abuse, the kind of control, the disappearing, the not knowing where he was, then he'd come back and sometimes in the middle of the night, the constant accusations, like that sort of thing I talked to her about probably from the very beginning. The fact that I was secret, I had to hide. I couldn't tell any of my friends that I was with him for a long time because he told me everyone would blame me for the split with him and his partner, so I had to kind of sneak around and kind of get brought to his house, typically in a secretive way, and then he'd come to mine in a secretive way, and it was just all very, so very isolating. And I confided with her at the very beginning on that sort of thing, and then later opened up to her about some of the violence. I did it gently. First I just wanted to have someone to talk to about how scary it was. The rage and the uncontrolled violence, the rage that this man had, and why it was
Objection,
pointed
Your
at
Honor,
me.
hearsay. May we approach, please?
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take our 15-minute afternoon break, so please do not talk about the case. We're doing the outside research. Okay, we'll see you soon. All right, and Ms. Hurd, just a reminder that now that you're on the stand, you cannot discuss your testimony with anybody to include your attorneys, okay? All right, so we'll be back. Let's make it 3:45, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. right, we ready for the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Please be seated. Your next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Amber, I'm going to take you up to March of 2013. Can you describe your relationship with Mr. Depp during that month? And we'll start there.
I remember that was after a period of some peace, and then and sobriety. Johnny was sober, drinking Beck's, and my dad, who was struggling with alcohol and drug addiction at the time, had fallen off the wagon, and I remember he said, "Why don't we I want to send a picture to your dad of support," because my sister was upset with my dad. And so he poured a shot and kind of said, "Let's take a picture." I don't drink spirits, but I know that, I kind of held up in that picture. It's kind of eerie because I just think it's bizarre. He had broken this long period of sobriety that I thought was going to be the end of him drinking forever. Sounds foolish now, but I held up this kind of glass with him, and we sent the picture to my dad because I didn't know what else to do. And I remember thinking it was weird that he was drinking. And then the month got really crazy from that point on. It was a bit of a revolving door of accusations. He was accusing me of having affairs with, frankly, just one person. I had an acquaintance with somebody, and he was accusing me of being with them, and then it was accusing me of being with my friend, the one I had seen in Spain. I'm in these kind of arguments, nothing I do is working. Walking out of the room is me leaving him, walking away from me. Hey, where are you going? I'm talking to you. That it went from that to pulling me in by my arm, still shouting about the accusations. I'm trying to diffuse the situation by trying to tell him I'm not sleeping with this person and I'm not sleeping with that person. And it was kind of, as soon as it seemed as though I had convinced him of one, there was somebody else he was sure I was sleeping with. And it was a revolving door at that time. A painting I had hanging on the wall, done by my ex, who's an artist. That was, one day he was convinced that was proof I was sleeping with her or having an affair with her. I didn't really love him, and all the while I'm madly in love with him and trying to convince him. So March started with this picture of him doing a shot, and he's kind of saying, "Let's send it to your dad to show support." And what I remember of March is just like it's almost like it was a never-ending fight. It was just, there were breaks in it. What kept me in it is because I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, the sobriety shoe, if you will. I kept waiting for him to get to the point where it's not supportable, anymore, and he's done with it, and he's ready to get clean and sober again, because there commences a period of like pure joy. And it was one fight after the other. March.
So let me start with the painting incident. Please tell the jury what happened on that particular incident with the painting.
As I mentioned, the painting, which had been hanging there for months, one day he kind of stayed up doing cocaine, just drinking, doing cocaine, music, which is not in and of itself that weird in my relationship with Johnny at this point. You know, like he stays up and keeps weird hours and smokes and stuff. But he was drinking brown liquor and doing a lot of cocaine, and it was like, it became clear to me in that argument, if you will, that he wasn't making sense. He had effectively just taken, it seemed like, a turn and had decided that the painting was an offense that he could not forgive me for. It meant I was having an affair with my ex-partner, with whom I had already split, and it made no sense to me. So I'm trying to kind of quell the accusations by saying, you know, it's been there, and what are you talking about? And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. And, you know, he was demanding I take it down. He eventually takes it down and tries to burn it, but it was unsuccessful, luckily, because he was not, he wasn't, with one of those normal, what do you call them, Bic lighters, he wasn't very successful at doing it while drinking, to the extent he was. But I remember it was this kind of ridiculous fight, like didn't feel like it needed to be an argument, but it seemed like nothing I could do, nothing I could say. I tried leaving. I left the room. I left the house. I eventually came back. It was like a whole night, an evening, a night, and then a morning of this. So this morning in particular, I think it was the 22nd of March. There were several incidents in March, though. But in this particular one, he had something to go to. He was filming with Keith Richards and Tom Waits.
Well, let me, before you go into that part, let's pull up Defendants Exhibit 161, which is already admitted into evidence, I believe, Your Honor.
Yes, 161 with redactions.
Thank you. And I'm going to show you Defendants Exhibit 161. And the date on this is 3/12/2013, and it's a text exchange between you and Mr. Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And the first one is from you to Mr. Depp. Just thought you should know there exists a book. Is that to you? Is it to Mr. Depp from you, or it's vice versa? Isn't it?
It's Johnny texting me.
Just thought you should know there exists a book titled Disco Bloodbath. And then you say, we need that book. And you say, is this about last Friday night by any chance? And he says, how can you make me smile about such a hideous moment? And I'm not going to repeat the rest of it. Could you tell the jury what happened on that Friday night?
There were, like I said, there was a few different incidents in March. I believe this one happened in the Eastern Columbia building, which is one of Johnny's penthouses. They're in downtown, so a different part of Los Angeles. And we'd sometimes go there. I remember he was accusing me again of sleeping with this artist, this musician who I'd never slept with. I was denying it. I barely knew the person. And then he was accusing me of sleeping with my friend in Spain. And I remember nothing I could do. He called this person on the phone and screamed at him. He didn't speak English, so he was really confused as to what he was being yelled at by Johnny. But I remember those were the accusations. That was the fight. But it was one to the next. accusation. And I remember I was kind of doing that juggling act. I was in one of these fights, I believe it's this one, in his downtown ECB, we call it, loft. And we're in the kitchen living room area, and he backhands me. And, it was, he wears a lot of rings. I remember kind of just feeling like my lip went into my teeth, and it got a little blood on the wall. Just that simple, a little bit of blood on the wall. As hard as it is to explain this, I was so caught up in the relationship and also very occupied in defending what I only could assume he believed, these accusations, that, I didn't internalize, like, I didn't make that big of a deal of it. I kind of pride myself on being tough, and, I don't make a big deal out of, smaller injuries. And I know that sounds horrible and hard maybe to understand, but my best way to cope with it is I kind of, minimize it, make sure no one, make sure he knows that I'm tough and can't knock me down, and I make a joke of it, clearly. Make light.
I'm going to, Michelle, if you can take this one down and bring up 170A. Did there come a time in March, Amber, where you sent a picture to your mom?
Yes, this is sometime in March 2013. I sent it to her because I had been texting about some of the craziness, and
Objection, hearsay.
I'll sustain as to what she may have texted. All right, next question.
Without saying what you said in the text, explain why you were sending it to your mom.
I was reaching out. I was very lonely in what I was living in, and I wanted help. I wanted advice, help. I just wanted to talk to somebody and figure out how I could make this stop.
And is this a picture that you took of yourself in March of 2013?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendants Exhibit 170A.
Any objection?
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right, 170A in evidence. You can publish the picture.
Thank you, Your Honor. And how did you sustain that bruise, Amber?
I had thrown Johnny slapped me. I walked away from him, and that made it worse. We got into like a shouting match. And he kind of did this thing with his body where I could tell he was going to hit me again. I picked up I remember it kind of like a little pot, not a pot, but like a vase. And I remember I got away from him enough as he reels back. I threw it in his direction, and I actually managed to get away before he got me. He grabbed me by the arm, and he kind of just held me on the floor, screaming at me. I don't know how many times he hit me in the face, but I remember being on the floor of my apartment, and I remember thinking, how could this happen to me again?
Can you bring up 170? Thank Thank you, Michelle. And if we can, and just to start, it's at 3/23/2013, and if we can scroll up. This is a text message exchange with your mom, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's go, scroll down, I meant.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to hearsay.
Let's wait until we get to the spot. All right, and is this the picture that you sent to your mom on 3/23/2013?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of 170, just that picture that's on the text.
With no words?
Well, it says from 2 weeks ago on it.
Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection.
If we redact the from 2 weeks ago, can we admit it then? And then just have the showing that she sent it to her mom
May
for
we
the
approach,
date?
Your Honor?
Okay. All right, 170 will be in evidence with redactions.
And may we publish to the jury, please?
All right.
And that's the picture you sent to your mom
Yes, it is.
on March 23rd, 2013?
Yes, it was from a previous fight,
Okay.
the bruise.
All right. Now, did you have any other altercations in March 2013 with Mr. Depp?
Yes, we had a couple of these fights in Orange that were around this time, one of which I started to tell you about the painting.
You know, and I know I've interrupted you now twice on that, but I realize the jury doesn't. Can you tell them what you mean by orange, at Orange?
Sorry, Orange was my apartment that I kept in Los Angeles at the time.
And it was an apartment. What type of an apartment?
I rented the top of a duplex. So it was a house with the landlord living on the bottom floor. I rented the top floor.
Okay, thank you. Now, please continue with the painting. I'm sorry.
It seemed like nothing I could say to Johnny would convince him. He wanted me to remove the painting. And he wanted me to admit to this affair that I wasn't having. And I didn't want to admit to it because it's not true. So I held out, and he just drank more and did more cocaine. And I woke up the next morning, I think it was on the 22nd or the 23rd. I woke up in the morning and the breakfast table was like cocaine and booze. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to talk I wasn't going to be able to talk our situation down. I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it. And he was just so convinced that I was fighting with him or at the reason that he wouldn't leave the house. And he had something to go film that was important, and there were important people waiting for him. And I remember people were reaching out, his assistants, his manager sister, everyone was wondering where he was. And I kept feeling embarrassed and unable to move this person out of my house. I couldn't calm him down. I couldn't change. He was just so intent on me admitting the details of this affair that I wasn't having. And me pointing out that the cocaine wasn't making his situation any better made me the bad cop. Then I'm the nag. So eventually I called my sister. He had a kind of a buddy-buddy relationship with her at the time. And at the time, she occasionally did cocaine. I didn't, but she did. So I was like, hey, come take over. You know, maybe you can buddy him and talk him into leaving the house, just getting out of the house. And she did. I remember his assistants trying to get him out. Like, we eventually in the evening, I think early evening, he finally agrees to leave, but I can't tell our relationship status. I can't tell if he still is convinced of these things or if he's just going to sleep it off and it's going to go back to normal sobriety, sorry kind of phase. And he was still upset, but like seemingly calming down. So I agreed to go with him. He wanted me to go to the shoot. I had planned, so I kind of reluctantly agreed, but didn't want to set anything off. I didn't want to engage anymore. I didn't want to do anything that could be perceived as antagonizing him or engaging more. So I went with him. We grabbed the dogs. We get in the car. We're on the way there. We're headed up. Sweetser is the street. It's a major street that leads up to Johnny's houses. He effectively owns the end of the street. It's like a cul-de-sac. So we're nowhere near his home, but we were driving up this street, and he has the window down. He's smoking. It wasn't all the way down, but, you know, he's constantly smoking, and at some point he starts howling out of the window and then grabs two small dogs. Well, one was Johnny's dog and one was my dog, but he grabs, if I remember correctly, Boo, his dog, slightly chunkier teacup Yorkie, and he grabs this teacup Yorkie and holds Boo out of the window of the moving car. And he's howling like an animal while holding the dog out of the window. And everyone in the car, I'll never forget it, everyone just froze. No one did anything. And I too was like torn as to what I should do, because I didn't want to do anything to cause him to react, drop the dog. You know, it was just this eerie moment where he's howling and holding this animal outside of the car window. And more than that weird memory is I have a memory of everyone just kind of not really reacting to him. Like, no one really kind of did anything. I eventually kind of pulled his arms gently back into the vehicle and kind of got the dog back on the seat, and we continued driving, but no one reacted. They just kind of avoided dealing with it. We get to the place, the house where he was filming this thing that he was late for, I suppose, for the day. And we walk in. Meanwhile, I've been bombarded by text messages and calls and conversations with everyone seemingly so stressed about...
Objection, hearsay.
All right.
Just don't tell us what somebody else said, just what you observed.
I understood everyone was stressed. They seemed stressed to me about the tardiness. Where is he? Let's get him there, you know, so we get him there. And no one reacts when we get in. I mean, we walk into this house where everyone was waiting for him, and everyone smiles and says, you know, hey, boss.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Let's, Michelle, can we pull up 167A? I think is B the one that's in? 167B is already in, right? Oh, it's A. Okay, then go ahead and pull up A. Does Your Honor show that one to be in 167A? Defendants, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, this might be your 167A, but it's in evidence as a plaintiff's number, and I'm not sure which plaintiff's number it is. I don't need it in twice, so.
I would agree. Do we?
Your Honor, I don't think it's this version of the photograph that's been admitted, so
It's a different version,
a
same
different-
photograph, but a little different, is that what we're?
it's not the same photograph.
Okay, not the
All
same
right, well,
photograph,
then-
then we'll go with it. Then
Okay.
what number is it?
Do you recognize this photo?
Yes, I do.
Please tell the jury what it is.
It's a picture I took of my breakfast table that morning.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendants Exhibit 167A.
167A, any objection?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure. A is in evidence. You can publish.
So may we publish that? Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, and Amber, you said that you took this that morning, is that
Yes.
correct? Could you tell the jury what the box is that has the property with the skull bones, property of JD?
That's Johnny's drug box. I've seen it used for pills, but at the time it was bags of Coke, like dime bags of Coke.
Okay, and what are these white lines on the table to the left of that box?
That is cocaine.
Okay. And do you know what is in these two glasses that have kind of a gold colored liquor?
Yes, they're different, actually. It's confusing. They're different. Different liquids. The one in the back in the larger glass is, I believe at the time I was doing these tabs, or Barocca, that's what they're called. They're little tablets. And anyway, I remember at the time that's what I was putting in my water because I had just come back from France where they sell them. And then the brown liquid in the shot glass is Johnny's liquor. I don't know what it's called, but we kept it in the freezer. At the time, it was at that time, March 2013, I hadn't, I still didn't have the, hard line. I won't even keep that, in my freezer sort of attitude or posture with him. I wasn't that bold at the time, I didn't like it, but I didn't have that strength. I kind of, at that time, I think was doing things like trying to pour it out when I could.
So what is the bag, the brown bag on the left side? What is that?
That's a DOP kit. It's his prescriptions and cigarette, tobacco, weed, things like that.
Okay, and then above it there appears to be a CD of some sort, DVD, something. Do you recognize that?
Yes, it's the single, I believe is what it's called, the single he was making at the time. I think that's the song that they were filming a video for, if I'm correct.
Okay. All right. Now, did you end up sending a copy of this picture to Rocky Pennington that day?
I did. I sent it to my best friend at the time and, it was like, look at my morning.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay, you can't say what you said, but you sent it to your friend, correct?
I
Let's
sent
go
it
to
to my friend.
167, please. And is that the email in which you sent this picture to Rocky Pennington on 3/22?
Yes.
2013? Your Honor, I'd like to move the admission of the picture with the redaction of the message on it, with the top with identifier redactions, and we take out the rest of it.
All right, any objection?
No objection.
All right, so I'm going to do those redactions, 167 and evidence with redactions.
All right. And may we publish, please? All right, and is this the text message, the email that you sent to Rocky with this picture?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to take you to, let's go to Hicksville. Let's tell the jury about Hicksville, May 2013. Can you tell the jury what transpired at Hicksville?
It's a fancy trailer park, like a little hotel in the middle of nowhere, set up with these little trailers, and we had made a plan to go there with friends, and we were going to do, like laffy, as we said, laffy drugs, like mushrooms, eat mushrooms, sit by a campfire. There's really not a whole lot else to do out there. It's like a getaway. We had made this plan, and it was going fine. It was like a, kind of like a party out in the desert, with a few friends and campfire and music. And I don't know somebody brought MDMA. It was being passed around, and somebody who took it kind of was starting to feel the effects of it, I guess is the best way to describe. She kind of reacted in this way where when the MDMA hit her, she kind of, we were sitting around a campfire, all of us, and she kind of just leaned into me and put her, head on my shoulder and kind of grabbed my arm. I took it, to be the effects of the drug. I think I had eaten a mushroom cap, but was not feeling anything at the time. I don't remember feeling anything because the night just kind of changed pretty dramatically before I really felt anything of the effects of that. But that was the environment we were in, and as soon as she kind of did this thing where she leaned into me, Johnny gets really activated. He gets really upset, and he starts, well, at first she thought he was kidding too. She thought he was kind of making a joke. I think we all did. Everyone kind of responded at first, that like it was a joke, but he was like, hey man, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And she kind of giggled and kind of leaned into me more. And I knew in my body just instantly that it wasn't a joke, but she didn't. So she's kind of still attached to my arm when he says it again to her louder. He says, hey man, you think you're touching my fucking girl? You think you're touching my fucking girl? That's my fucking girl. And he gets louder and louder. And she kind of did this thing, half understanding what was going on. I think she kind of started to cry at this point, but she kind of threw up her hands, and Johnny grabbed her wrist and kind of twisted it and pulled her into him and said, do you know how many pounds of pressure it takes to break a human wrist? Huh? And he kind of held her, and she just looked frozen. And she's crying, and was just denying understanding what was going on. I stepped in. I kind of take Johnny's arm around, kind of take Johnny's hand, and kind of we start communicating. I don't remember if he immediately was accusing me or if it was sometime after. I wish I remembered, but we agreed that we'd go and talk about it in the trailer. So we walked to the trailer, and when we're in the trailer, Johnny, by the time we get into the trailer, Johnny tells me that I had been instigating the, and asking for this, and that I had invited it, and that I hadn't been honest with him about my relationship with this woman. And I didn't really know her that well. I mean, I actually don't know her at all, but I had met her. And I remember in the trailer, he's accusing me of lying about it, and that I had something with her. I'm trying to diffuse that. I'm trying to calm him down. And he just turned all that, it seemed like he turned all that rage onto the trailer itself. And he just started smashing things. He picked up something on the table and threw it right into the glass cabinet. He hit with his hand a wall sconce. He cleared the tabletop on the little fold down like kitchen dining room area in this trailer. I mean, it's a trailer, so there's only so much you can do. And he's screaming at me, just screaming at me. And I eventually go back into the bedroom area. He comes into the bedroom area. We had what I can only describe as it sounded like nonsense from him. It wasn't making sense. And I realized that he's just probably really high, because it wasn't making sense anymore. It wasn't like a direct accusation. He wasn't hearing me when I was saying I wasn't involved, wasn't cheating on him. I wasn't secretly trying to engage this woman in some sort of sexual affair. And then it became clear to me he was like looking for something. He cleared things off the bed. I went into the bathroom, and as I come out, he asked me where it is and how long I've been hiding it. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he says, you know what I'm fucking talking about. You know what I'm fucking talking about. Be honest with me. Where are you hiding it? And he kind of like makes to look into the bathroom. And I gestured to the bathroom, which was to my right. I kind of like gestured to him, and I said, like, what am I hiding, and where am I gonna hide it? And we're standing in this little hallway area outside of the bathroom, and he starts, what feels like patting me down, or saying he's patting me down. I can't recall, but he ripped my dress, the strap top part of my dress. I had just dyed this thing myself pink, and it's just one of those things. I was like, I just finished that dress. And he's like grabbing my breasts, he's touching my thighs, he rips my underwear off, and then he proceeds to do a cavity search. He said he was looking for his drugs, his cocaine, his coke. I was wondering how somebody who didn't do cocaine and was against it, that was in and of itself causing problems in our relationship. How could I hide? Why would I hide his drugs from, like he was insinuating that I was doing it or something? It made no sense. And he was telling me we're gonna conduct a cavity search, shall we? Like, just shoved his fingers inside me. Just stood there staring at the stupid light. I didn't know what to, I didn't know what to do. I just stood there. While he did that, he just twisted his fingers around. I didn't say, like, stop or anything.
So the next morning, what transpired?
I remember thinking that Johnny would change his mind. And it would be, I thought it would end differently. I kind of froze. I don't know how we went to bed that night. I don't know how I went to bed. I don't know how I slept. I don't know how we woke up. I don't remember having a conversation with him the next day. I don't remember talking to him about it or confronting him about it. I remember wanting it to be okay. I remember just wanting whatever fucking weird trip, whatever trip that was to end, just to be over and for it to just go back to normal. And I remember my friends were out by the pool. Like there was a pool in the center of the trailer park, and I remember putting on my, just putting on my face and going back into this like crowd, and I remember seeing my friends by the pool thinking they were just having a great time, and no one knew what was, I felt so lonely, like no one knows everyone was just having a good time, like normal stuff. So I just smiled and made a joke about how trashed the trailer got, and we had to get the manager, who started off furious that Johnny had wrecked the thing. And then he had this like black mesh it was like a meshy kind of shirt on. And I remember he came into the trailer and looked around and was like, whoa, what happened here? Whoa. And Johnny had an exchange with him. And I remember watching this man be so charmed. It was just a kind of a surreal experience. And, it just went away. That just got fixed. We walked out of the trailer at some point. My dog stepped on a bee. We went to the vet and went on with our, vacation. We actually went to another location after that, and then eventually went home and went about our life.
I'm going to ask you to take a look. Michelle, can you bring up Defendants Exhibit 176? Was in May of 2013. Did there come a time that you wrote an email?
Objection, leading, and hearsay, Your Honor. May we approach?
All right.
In June 2013, how were you feeling about your relationship with Mr. Depp?
May we have the exhibit taken away
Okay,
from,
sure.
thank you.
By June, I was so torn. I was so in love with this person. Because when it was good, it was so good. You've never felt love like that. At least that's how it felt. So much. I felt like he recognized me and I recognized him, and there was just something there that was the love of my life. And he was. He was, but he was also this other thing. He was also this other thing. And that other thing was awful, awful thing that would come out and take over. And it was, you couldn't see the Johnny I loved underneath it. It was this other thing. And no one told him. No one was honest with him. No one, he'd pass out in his own vomit. He'd lose control of his body, he'd lose control, and everyone would clean up after him. I cleaned up after him. I mean, this man lost control of his bowels, and I cleaned up after him. His security cleaned up after him, changed his pants in front of me. He would pass out in his own sick. And then he'd walk around saying he didn't have a problem. Until he did. Until he couldn't support it anymore, and he'd get clean and he'd get sober, and then he was this thing again. This thing that made me feel so loved, that made me feel like my soulmate. As cheesy as that sounds, I just felt like he knew me. And I recognized something in him, either some part of my makeup and my background or something, that I just got it. And I loved him and understood him. It just got so scary, the other part of him. And in June, I wanted to leave him. I didn't want to leave him. I wanted to leave him. I wanted him to get better. And he expressed to me so many times when he was in that period of getting clean and sober, he would tell me, "You saved my life. Baby girl, you saved my life." Everyone else was saying that to me, and I believed it. If everyone else was saying it, he was saying it. I thought, just like his other friends who had gotten clean and sober and stayed that way, his older friends, these rock stars that he hung out with that had gotten clean and sober and they had 20, 30 years, something, I thought, and Johnny told me he would be that person, that he was going to be that person, and I believed it. I had so much, I looked at that man twice my age, I was 25, looking at this man twice my age, and I saw hope and promise. I had so much hope. The whole thing. Kids and growing old together, sort of hope. If it was just for this one thing that he could do, which would save his life, which would be to get clean and sober. And I believed it. And I wrote this letter to myself, among many letters to myself.
Objection,
because I
hearsay.
thought,
All she did was refer to that she wrote it. She isn't saying what she said.
I'll overrule for that.
Thank
point,
you.
Okay.
I wrote that letter because I thought it would be read to him. I could read it to him. I could say it to him in intervention, in help. And he would later thank me for, as he used to thank me all the time for saving his life.
Did there come a time later in June that you finally met Johnny's kids?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I finally met them in the summer of 2013. I had been with Johnny for over a year, maybe like a year and a half at this point, is my best guess. And I was dying to meet them, you know, dying to get to know these kids. I felt like I knew them already. I had his daughters, and Jack's, both of his kids' art on my fridge, and I had never even met them. You know, Johnny had brought them over one day and kindly given them to me, and I had them up on my fridge because I felt like I knew them, just how much he talked about them. And I finally got to meet them at the Lone Ranger premiere at Disneyland. Summer 2013.
So then I'm going to jump to, and it's not much of a jump, to June 26, 2013. There was a plane ride to Russia with Johnny. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Well, tell the jury about that particular event.
Well, that was the first and last time I ever decided it would be a decent idea to do drugs with Johnny. I did MDMA with him on the plane, which was as stupid as it may sound. I just had never, I was very against, obviously the cocaine had been a problem. I was very much against him using cocaine. I was against the drinking, supportive of the sobriety, but I'm 26 maybe, ish. And I wanted, I had never heard of anyone making MDMA like what I had done MDMA before. I thought it's a lovey drug. It's it's like a kind of, I never knew anyone to get violent on it. And, I thought, well, this is a relatively contained environment. Maybe this will be different. Maybe I can be a good cop and be part of the, I don't have to be the lesbian counselor all the time, as you would say. I could maybe be the fun girlfriend. And I learned the hard way that was not happening.
So what happened?
Well, we took MDMA. I took a capsule. It's like a powder in a capsule. I took a capsule, and Johnny took several. I didn't count, but it's very different when you see someone take one versus a handful of something. But nothing seemed to set any alarm bells off, and things were going fine until the flight attendant got involved. The flight attendant came by, was engaging with us. I don't think that they're really, it felt like it was before the effects of the drug took over. It was relatively quick, soon after we first took our dose, if you can say. And the flight attendant, Johnny offered her some. She, of course, said no. And then after some back and forth between them, Johnny convinced her that it would be fine. So she acquiesced and took MDMA with us. And within, a few minutes go by, and the same thing happened that happened on the mushrooms at Hicksville with the woman, Kelly Sue, who I've told you about. Flight attendant got friendly with me, but just friendly, just like MDMA friendly, was kind of, I'm a woman, he's a man, so she was naturally, I think, more comfortable with me physically. She kind of leaned into me and kind of sat on the arm of the chair I was sitting in. I mean, after all, she's on drugs, and Johnny grabs her hand and tells her not to touch me, and she kind of reacts in a way like she's defending herself and was trying to clarify. And he grabbed her by the wrist and slammed it down on the table and told her he could break her wrist. And I remember thinking, I've heard this before. And that was a pattern that would repeat itself a few times. These things would happen in these kind of cycles where there would be a certain element that would get filtered for a while, whether it's an accusation or a gesture, and that would be the thing that he looped on. I called it loops. And he grabs her wrist and he tells her he could break her wrist. She cries instantly, denies it, is so apologetic. Eventually he lets go. She goes to the front of the plane where the flight attendant, normally hangs out, and the doors close, and I don't see her much of that whole flight. We land in Russia, and I don't really remember, I don't recall any violence on the plane between Johnny and I, but I remember feeling this tension because I was wondering when it was gonna aim at me, because he had this particular thing about, at the time I understood he had a particular thing, a sensitivity about me and women, because I had a female partner. So I was feeling nervous, anxious, and I remember we had a very quiet ride, at least I didn't say anything, to the ride to the hotel. And almost as soon as we get into the hotel room, Johnny's accusing me of effectively having engaged that, caused that. I, of course, deny it, point out what I thought was obvious, that, we'd given her drugs, wasn't an affair, wasn't, and I'm trying to argue and defend myself at the same time. And at one point, Johnny just shoves me, just shoves me hard. And I fall back onto this glass table. I catch myself on the table. I don't know how some furniture got knocked around. There was I'm trying to stand up for myself. I'm trying to stand up, literally. I'm not, at this point, I don't even try to hit back or try to run. I'm in this hotel room trying to do my best to fight mostly the verbal accusations, but also I try to stay on my feet, At some point, Johnny whacks me in the face, and I don't remember feeling pain or awareness of my nose or anything. I don't remember thinking that. I remember kind of crying and feeling, I went into the bathroom and I wanted him to have I just remember wanting him to realize what had happened. I wanted him to kind of snap out of it. I wanted him to care. I wanted him to realize what was going on, because a big part of this, I felt like he wasn't aware. There was this sense that he didn't know what was going on. Again, I don't know how much of the drugs or alcohol is a part of this, but I remember crying. I came out at some point because I don't hear him in that room. I remember we had been arguing in the main room, but I went out to the hallway, which is where I presume he walked out, and his bodyguard, Jerry Judge, was in the hall. And I don't recall seeing Johnny in the hallway, but I remember seeing Jerry Judge, who gestured to my nose.
Objection, hearsay.
She's just saying gesture. He hasn't said anything yet.
All right, gesture's fine. I'll overrule the objection.
He gestures to my nose and holds out his handkerchief, like a cloth handkerchief. And I instantly felt really embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I don't know how else to describe it. I just felt like just really embarrassing. And I went inside the room.
What, if any, injury did you have?
I had a little blood coming out of my nose. I didn't know it. I didn't feel it at the time until Jerry Jerry let me know.
Okay.
And I went inside the hotel room, and as embarrassing as it is, I remember just wanting Johnny to say sorry. I wanted him to realize it. It's so stupid, but I, like the emotional part, you know, I just wanted him to acknowledge that this was, that he could hurt me, you know, and I wanted it to be okay. I didn't want him to think I was interested in this flight attendant. I didn't want him to think that I would capable of cheating on him. I was in love with him. I wanted, you know, I just wanted things to be okay.
Let's take you to July 9, 2013. Did there come a time that you went for a ride you went to the Bahamas and went on a ride the yacht with Johnny and his kids?
Well, it's less like we flew out to the Bahamas to his island. He was selling the yacht to J.K. Rowling, and he wanted to kind of have a goodbye trip on the yacht. So it was docked off the island, and I went with him and his kids, who I had quickly developed a bond with and loved. And we brought a friend along with us, I think, to kind of help. And yeah.
Okay. Tell the jury what happened on that trip.
Johnny was upset that he had to sell the boat, and he was off the wagon again, but he didn't want to tell his kids, so he was hiding it from them. He was putting it in coffee cups and drinking, and the behavior just kind of like, he was upset, he was emotional, and he just, you know, that's how he dealt with it, just drink. But there's just no off button with Johnny. So he just kept drinking, and the behavior kept getting more obviously drunk. And Lily Rose, his daughter at the time, was young, just like maybe 14. And she started to get panicky and started to ask me questions about his drinking.
Objection, hearsay.
Without saying what Lily Rose was saying, please continue on.
Sustain the objection.
Thank you.
So she was asking me questions about the drinking, and was very upset.
Sustain the objection.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't say what Lily Rose said.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you can tell gestures,
Sorry.
you can tell, and you can say what you and Mr. Depp said, okay?
Sorry. So she was upset, and Johnny we were with the kids, and he kind of threw himself off the boat in a half playful way, like a dead fish kind of way. I don't know how to describe it, almost like a belly flop. But we were on a skip, like a smaller boat parked next to the yacht, and he's jumping. Well, he jumped off the front of it, but kind of in a face, chest forward way, like it looked a little scary, like not something somebody would do if they're completely okay. You know, it was started off all of us kind of taking turns jumping off the edge of the yacht into the water, and then he at one point kind of throws himself over, and it looked a little scary, the way his body fell into the water. And Lily Rose started to cry and expressed to me that she
Objection,
was
hearsay.
upset.
As sustained.
You can't say what she said. You can tell expressions or observations, but you can't say what Lily Rose said.
So
Okay.
Lily Rose is crying, and then the crying becomes like a panic, like almost like a panic attack. Like rapid breathing, crying, lots of questions, and I'm holding her, kind of comforting her, and Johnny comes in, and within a few seconds, I realize that he, you know, kind of shifted his attention on me, and then he seemed very angry. He asked Lily Rose to leave. Lily Rose leaves, looks at me, leaves, crying, and Johnny, I don't remember the words he used, but starts accusing me of kind of like telling on him and calling him you know, a drunk in front of his kids. I hadn't done that. I was actually trying to protect Johnny. it didn't feel like my place at all to share that with his daughter or anyone at the time, other than adults who might help with it, but not his kids. So I was trying to tell him, I was just trying to comfort her. I was trying to protect you. He basically was accusing me of doing this thing and of making them aware of his that he was drinking again. And he slams me up against the side wall of the bedroom of the we were in the bedroom this whole time, but up against the wall of the cabin, and slams me up by my neck and holds me there for a second and tells me that he could fucking kill me. And that was an embarrassment. I was embarrassing. It was an embarrassment. This whole thing was a joke. It was all embarrassment. I made him feel sick. And I'll never forget. I'm very, very, very much in love with this whole family now. And he's saying I'm embarrassing to him. And that somehow stuck in me more than the I could fucking kill you. It just sounded like hyperbole. It sounded like something he was just saying, but the names that he was calling me, well, kind of just pushing me up against the wall by my neck, you know, it hurt my feelings. It hurt. When I saw Lily Rose again, we get, I won't say what she told me, but the next thing we do is we call for a helicopter to come and take us off of the boat or off of the island. So we leave the boat, go to the landing of a part of the island, or maybe it was a different, island we had to get to leave, and we take off. I'm holding Lily Rose literally holding her under my arm while she's crying, and we're lifting off. And Jack ended up not coming with us at the last minute. He stayed behind. And we were taking off, and I remember being really torn about leaving. I felt bad about leaving, even though that had happened. I still felt awful leaving. I felt awful leaving him. I also felt like I had done something wrong. He was mad at me. I wasn't sure, what I had done, but I remember not being, I'm getting all these text messages from him calling me all these names, and it barely coherent, barely. And I'm holding his daughter crying.
And let me just stop you for a moment. Michelle, can you pull up Defendants Exhibit 180?
Do you believe that's already in
It
evidence?
is already into evidence, Your Honor, so if we may publish it to the jury. And Amber, I'm going to ask you to take a look at 180. And this is text messages from Mr. Depp to you. Do you recall these?
Yes, I do.
And are these the text messages?
Yes, that's what he was sending me while I was taking care of his daughter.
Your Honor, I'm about to go into another event. Should I keep going?
I mean, that's fine if you think this is a good point to
is
break
probably-
for the day.
I think it's probably good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and conclude for today. Again, do not read anything about this case. Do not do any outside research, and don't discuss it with anybody, okay? Have a good evening. We'll see you in the morning, okay? Thank you. And again, ma'am, since you're still in the stand, you cannot discuss your testimony with anybody to include your attorneys, okay? All right. Anything further before? All right, we'll see you in the morning.
Thank you, Your Honor.